Hey everyone, Cool Kid here. With the release of the Old Peace update, we got a lot of new bosses. While I do find them all to be pretty fun, my favorite of the bunch is easily the Prime Vanguard, a boss fight comprised of 6 challengers: Ash, Ember, Volt, Mesa, Protea, and Caliban. I've seen a lot of confusion surrounding this boss fight since its release, and after taking the time to study how each boss works, I want to share my findings with the wider community. The wiki is straight up wrong about a lot of this stuff at the moment, and I think that a lot of people's frustrations come from a lack of understanding how the bosses function, so my goal with this video is to both demystify the mechanics and share my love of this boss fight with all of you. Now, I want to acknowledge something up front real quick. I know you can just blitz through these bosses with Mesa or what have you, but this video is going to focus on engaging with the mechanics of the fight. If you don't really want to do that and instead just nuke the Vanguard off the face of Protea as soon as they spawn, that's totally fine, but this video isn't going to take that approach. I also know that these bosses often get melted in squads, so this video is going to be primarily from the perspective of a solo player. Okay, with that out of the way, I want to start with some high-level tips for the boss fight, and then we'll go over each Vanguard member individually. So, upon loading into the boss fight, you'll see each Vanguard member JoJo posing in the sky. While this may just seem like aura farming at first, it actually does convey useful information. The order they appear in the sky is actually the order you'll fight them in, going from left to right. You'll fight one Vanguard member, then 2, then 1, then 2 again, along with a final stand phase on the steel path where you fight all 6. On one end of the arena, you'll find a spawner that produces universal ammo, and on the opposite side, you'll find an energy orb spawner. Both of these refresh their respective drops periodically, and you'll want to make use of them, as energy and ammo are pretty rare otherwise. On that note, be aware that very few minions spawn in this boss fight. As such, activating conditional effects like galvanized mods and weapon arcanes is quite difficult, so I recommend bringing damage that isn't totally reliant on kills to activate. In a similar vein, the lack of minions makes orb generation difficult, so frames that rely on effects like equilibrium can also struggle to produce energy. Likewise, frames that rely on spamming ability casts for survival can struggle unless they have an independent form of energy generation. As for the Vanguard themselves, they're all immune to armor stripping, and even worse, they all have status reduction. This means that any given status effect is capped at 4 stacks, including DOTs, which is hugely detrimental to most status weapons. While you can definitely make it work, status hose type weapons generally struggle in this fight because of the 4 stack cap. Hard-hitting weapons that inflict strong status effects, like a Scythe Heavy Slash proc for example, do still work quite well. Generally speaking though, crit weapons dominate this boss fight, as they don't have any restrictions like status weapons do. The Vanguard frames are also members of the Anarch faction, so they take bonus damage from electric and impact and reduced damage from radiation. I also want to note that the basic attacks of most Vanguard members deal pretty low damage if you have any amount of DR, so you can safely face tank a lot of their gunshots to help you focus on dodging the dangerous stuff. If you don't have any DR, this isn't really a great idea, but even just an adaptation can be super helpful. The initiative buffs from your focus school are also important to consider in this boss fight. I'd argue that Matter Eye is the most helpful generally, as it boosts the damage and fire rate of both your primary and secondary weapons. Naramon is also very good if you're playing around your melee, as it boosts both melee damage and critical chance. Lastly, Zenurik is very good for frames that rely on abilities or exalteds for damage, as it boosts power strength and max energy. Vazarin's boost can be helpful if you find yourself dying, as it grants a bump to maximum health, but the status chance increase it provides isn't that helpful considering the status reduction. Unairu grants armor and impact damage, which isn't that impressive all things considered, so while it's by no means bad, it won't provide a ton of value in this boss fight outside of its Tauron Strike. I mean, the bosses do take bonus damage from impact, so there's that I guess. The last overarching thing I want to note is that Sentinels can actually kind of be a detriment in this fight. Electric procs from Volt can hurt you if they're inflicted on your Sentinel, and Ember's Inferno can target your Sentinel, which can result in a lot of extra damage. While it's not strictly needed, it can be worth taking a Beast Companion instead of a Sentinel so that they don't share their damage with you. Also, funnily enough, all 3 of Uriel's minions suffer from this problem, so all it takes is 1 Inferno or Discharge to wipe the floor with him because all of his summons will also be targeted. Alright, with all of that stuff out of the way, let's get into the individual Vanguard members, their attacks, their counters, and how to best handle them. First up is Ash, the group's primary damage dealer. Ash's attacks are extremely dangerous, with several of his abilities one-shotting players they connect with. Fortunately, all of these one-shots are counterable if you know what to look for, so let's go over his attacks. As a baseline, Ash wields the Hiku Prime for ranged combat and switches to a Nakana Prime when up close. The melees in this fight are generally more dangerous than the ranged weapons, so do keep that in mind. Whenever Ashe isn't actively using an ability, he'll select the respective weapon based on his distance from the player, though these attacks can be easily avoided by taking cover or staying mobile. For our first ability, Ashe will split into 4 shadow clones that mimic his basic attacks. During this attack, the shadow clones will slowly dissolve, and if they reach maximum dissolution, then Ashe will teleport to the player and insta-kill them even through their shields. This attack is basically a game of Guess Who, as you have to find and damage the real Ashe to stop him from performing the insta-kill. Dealing enough damage to the real Ashe will cause him to be knocked down, which ends the attack and despawns the clones. As a pro tip, if you put a waypoint on Ashe, then it'll remain on him when he uses the attack, which allows you to find the real Ashe immediately. If Ashe has any DOT effects when he casts this attack, they'll still damage him, which can also kick him out of the attack early. You may not want to do this though, as the shadow clones can be used for conditional buffs like galvanized mods, so it can be helpful to deliberately avoid the real Ashe so that you can build up stacks off of his clones. Ashe's next ability is Smokescreen, where he throws a bomb at his feet and turns invisible. I say that with air quotes because Ashe is very much visible, taking on an almost glassy sheen while emitting smoke. This ability is pretty rare all things considered, and it's not that dangerous, especially if you have him waypointed. Teleport, Ashe's next attack, is signaled by him raising his Nakana above his head before disappearing. After a brief delay, Ashe will appear behind the player and attempt an overhead strike for big damage. This attack can be pretty easily rolled away from, but if you're fast enough, you can actually damage Ashe as soon as he appears behind you, which knocks him down and ends the attack early. Ashe's final ability, Blade Storm, is one of his most dangerous. Ashe will float up into the air with an icon of an eye above his head. All players within Ashe's line of sight will get a mark every 3 or so seconds, and at 3 marks, a shadow clone will teleport to that player and insta-kill them. When Ashe starts this attack, you need to run and hide as soon as possible. Breaking line of sight will cause Ashe to cancel the attack after a few seconds, so get out of there quickly unless you want to spend a revive. Now that we're through all of Ashe's regular attacks, it's time to talk about a mechanic I haven't mentioned yet, Revenge. After defeating a Vanguard frame, that frame can reappear in subsequent encounters, aiding their allies with a unique revenge attack. Fortunately for us, Ashe's revenge is pretty easy to deal with. All he does is spawn in 3 shadow clones, who raise their swords before rushing at the player. This attack can be easily avoided by jumping or rolling out of their path, as each Ashe clone travels in a straight line. Ignoring this attack entirely can be deadly, but if you're at all lucid, then it shouldn't be a huge problem. Next up is Ember, who serves as another damage dealer for the group. Many of Ember's attacks inflict a fire DOT, along with large hitboxes that can be difficult to avoid. Many of her attacks also stagger or knock down, which makes her especially deadly. Ember wields a Sicarus Prime for ranged combat and a Glaive Prime that also gets used in ranged combat, with the Glaive dealing a good chunk of damage on hit. Ember's first ability, Fireball, is pretty self-explanatory. Ember launches a fireball at a player, which explodes on contact and leaves a lingering patch of fire. A direct hit from the fireball will knock down, and any contact with the fire patch will inflict a heat proc. This attack comes out fast, but travels pretty slowly, so if you're struggling to avoid it, then keep your distance so you have the maximum amount of time to dodge. Other than that, just remain aware of the fire patch, and you should be good. Next up is Fire Blast, which works basically identically to an Arson Eximus Blast. Ember will release a ring of fire that knocks down and inflicts a heat proc on hit, but both the knockdown and the heat proc can be avoided by rolling through the ring. Breaking line of sight will also prevent the attack from connecting, so if you're in a bind, you can quickly duck behind a rock to stay safe. Ember's last attack, Inferno, is easily her most dangerous. During this attack, Ember floats up into the air and gains high damage reduction while channeling. This causes orange rings to surround allies, along with flames that slowly populate said ring. Once a ring accumulates 4 flames, a meteor will come down from the sky, striking the targeted ally for both a heat proc and a stagger. These meteors deal pretty high damage, which carries over to the resulting heat proc. To dodge the attack, you'll actually want to stay low to the ground while keeping an eye on the flames surrounding you. As soon as you hit 4 flames, roll, as the meteors have a fixed path once they spawn. The reason I suggest staying low to the ground is that the meteors fall from the sky, so if you're airborne, then the meteors have less distance to travel before they hit you, which gives you less time to get out of the way. Ember will also target your companions with this attack, so if you have a beast equipped, try not to dodge into their meteor. Now, while Ember is channeling Inferno, she can be kicked out of the attack with enough damage, but the DR she receives during this ability makes that tricky. Fortunately, Ember's chest will glow red during this attack, and attacking this weak spot will up your crit tier and avoid this damage reduction entirely. If you're close enough to do so, kicking Ember out of Inferno is a very good strategy, as it both ends the ability instantly and deals a lot of damage to her. If she's too far to reliably damage her chest, then focus on staying low and rolling in time with the meteor strikes, which should keep you alive. Lastly, we have Ember's Revenge attack. During this attack, Ember spawns near the player and begins channeling a massive fireball. After about 10 seconds, she'll throw the entire sun at the floor, which deals big damage, inflicts a beefy heat proc, and briefly ignites the floor. Fortunately, this revenge attack is pretty easy to avoid, as Ember doesn't move at all after she spawns. So long as you aren't anywhere near Ember when she throws the fireball, you'll be safe, so just get to the other side of the arena before that happens. Volt is somewhat similar to Ember in that he deals high damage and inflicts lingering DOTs, but he has more tricks up his sleeve than that. Volt is especially tricky to pin down, and his electric procs can spell a quick death if you aren't careful. Volt's electric procs will also cause affected allies to damage other allies within 3 meters, so if you get hit with an electric status, then stay away from your teammates. In ranged combat, Volt wields a Corvus Prime, making him the only Vanguard member to wield an art gun, and in melee range he whips out the dual Charis Prime. These basic attacks are pretty dangerous in comparison to the rest of the cast, but fortunately, they're also pretty easy to avoid, as Corvus has a slow projectile and the swords can be avoided by staying at a distance. Volt's first ability, Shock, is pretty straightforward. Volt will fire a laser out of his hand, hold it briefly, and then sweep it horizontally. I've also seen him fire the laser directly at a player and not sweep it, but that seems pretty rare. If you're hit by this laser, you'll take both a stagger and an electric proc, which can easily set you up for another attack. Fortunately, this attack is easily avoided by jumping, so if you see Volt fire the laser, then jump before he drags it over you. Volt's next ability, Speed, is an interesting one. While active, Volt will rapidly teleport around the arena, stopping to fire a shot from his Corvus between teleports. If approached in this state, Volt will attack with very fast melee strikes, which is extremely dangerous. During this attack, your best bet is to stay at a distance and keep your eyes on Volt as best you can. Slows from things like cold procs can also be very useful, as they make Volt much easier to track and dodge. Volt's third ability, Electric Shield, is probably his most infamous. Volt spawns a front-facing shield that blocks all range damage, though melee attacks can still go through it. Because Volt tries to face the player, this makes him effectively impervious to ranged attacks, but there is an easy way to counter this. Each corner of Volt's shield sparks, and shooting a sparking corner will break the spark. Once all 4 corners have been shot out, the shield breaks, which also inflicts an electric proc on Volt, stunning him and dealing damage. The shield can be combined with Speed, which makes Volt even more dangerous, though the stun from breaking the shield can be used to interrupt Speed and give you an opportunity to lay on damage. Volt's last ability, Discharge, works similarly to its player counterpart. Volt will briefly float in the air before casting the ability, inflicting all players and companions in range with both an electric proc and the discharge effect. Being near other allies will cause you to share damage from the discharge effect and the electric proc, so if you do get hit by this ability, then stay away from any teammates or companions. Fortunately, this attack is pretty easy to dodge, as the radius is quite small and the attack is entirely line of sight dependent. Just get away from Volt when he floats up into the air and you should be good. Lastly, we have Volt's Revenge attack, which is easily the most dangerous revenge of the entire fight. During this attack, Volt will appear in the middle of the arena before floating up into the air and firing electric lasers in all directions. Huh, that looks familiar. Contact with these lasers will inflict both high damage and a stagger, which in combination with the high number of lasers creates a very dangerous play space. Unlike most other revenge attacks, you can't easily avoid this attack by just moving away from the casting frame. You can try to weave through the lasers if you've got the nerve, but this attack is most easily avoided by either hiding behind a rock or standing in the center of the arena underneath Volt. Of course, with this being a revenge attack, you'll also be dealing with the other Vanguard members at the same time, which makes this difficult to juggle. My advice is to stand beneath Volt if it's safe to do so, and if it's not, then move from cover to cover while staying away from any active primes until the ability ends. Next up is Mesa, who is kind of a joke, honestly. I genuinely wonder if this frame is bugged, because she's so easy compared to the rest of the cast. She's supposed to be a damage dealer and disabler, but she's really not that hard to deal with. At range, Mesa will wield the Okchigara Prime, and up close she'll use the Redeemer Prime. Her Redeemer is actually pretty interesting, as it knocks down on hit, so getting into melee range of Mesa can be kind of a challenge. Mesa's first ability, Peacemaker, spawns a targeting cone in front of her. Any allies within this cone will be subject to a hail of bullets from her regulators, and if no players are in this targeting cone, then she will attempt to rotate until she can see them. I say attempt because this attack is currently very buggy, and she very often fails to rotate, even not firing at all on some occasions. Now, you can just stay at a distance to avoid this attack, but if you get in close, you can actually melee Mesa, which will knock her down and end the ability early. You can block her bullets to push up on her before delivering the knockdown, or you can come in with an aerial slam to safely knock her on her ass. This can be a good window to attack Mesa if you're using your melee, or you can just sit outside of her attack range and wail on her. This attack is really easy to avoid, and it also deals pretty low damage if you have any form of DR, so it's really not that threatening. Mesa's next ability, Shooting Gallery, is very different from its player counterpart. Similar to Peacemaker, Mesa will spawn a targeting cone, though this time she'll equip her Redeemer. After a brief delay, Mesa will fire the Redeemer, and any players caught in the cone will be knocked down and drop their currently equipped weapon. This attack is avoided in the exact same ways as Peacemaker. You can stay at a distance, or melee Mesa out of the attack for a knockdown. You can also use a melee to block the attack, which will avoid the disarm. While this attack is pretty fast, Mesa can't move the targeting cone once the ability starts, so it's not super difficult to avoid if you see it coming. That's it for her abilities. No, seriously, she only has 2 abilities, and they're avoided in the exact same way. I've seen VFX on Mesa that imply she might have access to Shatter Shield, but I've never noticed any difference. She definitely doesn't have Ballistic Battery, which sucks. I honestly wonder if she's just bugged and not casting certain abilities, because as it stands, she feels like half a boss compared to the other Vanguard members. Lastly, we have Mesa's Revenge attack. During this attack, Mesa will spawn in and begin firing a hail of bullets down onto the play space, which is signaled by several lines drawn from Mesa to her target. This attack doesn't deal a ton of damage if you have any amount of DR, and it can be easily avoided by staying out of her targeting lines. Next up is Protea, who serves as the group's tactician and support. Many of Protea's abilities revolve around deployables that she places, which makes her very different to fight than the other Vanguard members. All of Protea's deployables are also object health, so damaging them can be difficult if your weapon relies on critical hits or status effects. In ranged combat, Protea wields a Velox Prime, and when up close, she uses the Okina Prime. Protea's first ability, Grenade Fan, can make use of both of its forms just like players can. For shield satellites, Protea throws down 4 orbs that will latch onto herself and her allies, slowly granting shields as long as they're attached. If the frame shields are full, then Overguard is granted instead. These orbs can be destroyed to end the effect early, both when on the ground and when attached to an enemy. Pro tip, gas, electric, and blast procs can destroy the satellites if they're inflicted on the enemy directly, as they deal area damage. These drones should be dealt with quickly, as they can provide a lot of overguard to enemies if left unchecked, especially during the final stand phase. Protea's second ability is the other half of Grenade Fan, Shrapnel Vortex. For this attack, Protea marks 3 small zones with a green highlight. Standing in these zones rapidly applies slash procs, so avoid the highlighted areas and you should be fine. Next up is Blaze Artillery, which is Protea's most dangerous attack. On cast, Protea spawns 3 turrets that will lock onto nearby players and begin firing lasers that inflict the heat status. These lasers inflict high damage, and their heat procs also hurt, but fortunately, they do have targeting cones, so as long as you're outside of those cones, you should be safe. A big reason why this attack is so dangerous, aside from the high damage and 3 turrets, is that Protea will be fully actionable after casting Blaze Artillery, so you have to keep track of both Protea herself and the turrets. The turrets can be destroyed like Protea's other deployables, but they have object health, and quite a bit of it at that, so destroying them can be kinda tough. I personally use my amp to break these things, as it packs a solid amount of base damage, but that's just me. Like with her shield satellites, AoE status effects like Blast, Gas, and Electric can also destroy the turrets after they spawn, though Protea has to remain close for this to work, and the damage has to be quite high. Ultimately, take whatever approach works best for you, but this attack is easily her scariest in my opinion. Protea's final ability, Temporal Anchor, isn't super dangerous, but it is extremely annoying. On cast, Protea will become invincible, leaving a hologram of herself behind. As long as this hologram is active, Protea remains invincible, so priority number 1 should be destroying this Temporal Anchor. Problem is, the anchor has object health, and a lot of it, so it's a total pain in the ass to destroy. If you successfully break the anchor, then Protea will become vulnerable again alongside a knockdown. If you don't break the anchor fast enough though, then Protea will detonate and damage nearby players before rewinding to the anchor, which heals her. Like with her prior abilities, AoE status effects can help break the anchor if Protea remains close, but it has so much health that they often can't break it alone. Pack a weapon with solid base damage for this one, as it's a bullet sponge for sure. Lastly, we have Protea's Revenge attack, which isn't really an attack at all. Instead of some kind of damaging ability, Protea will instead return to help her allies, spawning a dispensary that links to the lowest health Vanguard member on the field and heals them. A green line is drawn from the target to the dispensary, so quickly locate and destroy it to stop the healing. Like every other deployable, dispensary has a decent amount of object health, so make sure to have a weapon that's good at dealing with deployables. I rely on my amp with the 5 prism, and I'll go ahead and show on screen the setup that amp uses. This is my go-to for dealing with Protea's bullshit, so if you're struggling to break her deployables in time, this might be helpful for you. Finally arriving at our last Vanguard member, we have Caliban. This frame inflicts a lot of staggers and knockdowns, on top of Tau procs that set up for status effects from his allies. At range, Caliban wields a Protea Prime, which causes lightning bolts to rain down on nearby allies after a shot connects, so if you're with a team, then spreading out can be helpful. At close range, Caliban wields the Voluntal Prime, which isn't really all that remarkable. Caliban's first ability is Razor Gyre, which causes him to go Beyblade mode and damage nearby players. From what I've noticed, he seems to have several patterns he can take, from a straight line, to zigzags, to moving in a circle. He might chase the nearest player, but to be honest, I'm not 100% sure. This attack deals damage and inflicts a Tau proc, but overall, it's not super dangerous. Staying high up in the air is an easy way to avoid this attack, but you can also just run across the arena to stay safe. Caliban doesn't go that far from his initial cast spot, so even though his hitbox is quite large, it's not super hard to get away from him. Caliban's next attack starts with him marking a wedge on the floor that quickly fills up. Once full, Caliban slams the ground and releases Sentient Wrath, which knocks down players caught in it. This attack deals a lot of damage and also inflicts a Tau proc, so I would recommend respecting it. Fortunately, this attack can be dodged by being airborne, so it's pretty easy to avoid. Caliban's third ability, Lethal Progeny, actually works similarly to Ember's Inferno. Caliban will assume a summoning stance, raising his hand and gaining high damage reduction. If Caliban doesn't take enough damage to interrupt this ability, then he will summon one of his 3 sentient allies, which we'll get to in a second. Now, like Ember, Caliban can easily take enough damage to knock him down by attacking a weak spot, his hand. This takes a lot of bonus damage, though it doesn't seem to chunk his health quite like Ember's weak spot does to her. You may want to actually let Caliban summon his minions though, as they're the only other way to trigger conditionals in this entire fight. Similar to his playable counterpart, Caliban has 3 summons: Conculists, Ortholists, and the Summalist. All 3 of these summons function the same as their regular enemy counterparts, but the Summalist has the additional effect of boosting Caliban's shield recharge. I actually think this attack is really interesting, as you can very easily stop Caliban from summoning his allies by attacking his hand, but you very well might want to let him call his gang so that you can get your conditionals going. Caliban's last ability, Fusion Strike, is not that great, to be honest. Caliban fires 3 lasers that converge in front of him, and contact with the lasers deals high damage and inflicts a Tau proc. Unlike the player version of this ability, those hit don't take a secondary explosion or lose any defenses, and there's no lingering zone after the cast finishes. This ability is pretty fast, so it can be kind of tough to avoid, but as is the case with many of Caliban's abilities, remaining airborne is a pretty easy way to stay safe. Lastly, we have Caliban's revenge attack, Razor Gyre 2 Electric Boogaloo. For this attack, Caliban picks a part of the arena and just razor gyres through it, going from one end of the room to the other. This attack shares the same properties as his regular razor gyre, but it's honestly super easy to avoid. If you spot him coming, then just move out of his path and you'll be fine. Alright, now that we've made it through every individual prime, I want to explain the approach to Final Stand. This last phase is Steel Path exclusive, in which all 6 frames will come down to fight you at the same time. I'm gonna be honest, this phase is total chaos, but I'll do my best to make it more manageable. My first tip is to save your tower on strike for this part of the fight, as it's really valuable to kill as many frames as quickly as you can. Thara is especially good for this, but all of the strikes work quite well in this final phase. Beyond that though, my number 1 piece of advice is this: kill Ashe immediately. His 2 insta-kill attacks are extremely dangerous, especially his Shadow Clone attack, as you won't even see it coming most of the time. I recommend marking him with a waypoint as soon as the phase starts and focusing on him as much as possible to ensure that he can't insta-kill you. Once Ashe is dealt with, who you kill next is up to you. I typically go for Ember, as Inferno and Fire Blast are very dangerous attacks, and her chest weak spot makes her pretty easy to take out early. Inferno's ability to track you from anywhere on the map is also super dangerous, so I try to get her out of the fight as soon as possible. It's also a good idea to focus on Protea, as her shield satellites buff all other frames with overguard generation, on top of her blaze artillery dealing a lot of damage. Volt is also a sizable threat, but he can be pretty easily stalled by staying away from him, so as long as you're aware of where he is, then he shouldn't be that much of a problem. In my opinion, both Mesa and Caliban are pretty easy, so I typically save them for the end. You should still ensure that you're avoiding their attacks as best you can, but they don't have any abilities that can take you out as quickly or easily as the others. Ultimately, how you approach this phase is up to you, but if you take any of my advice from this section, let it be this. Ashe has to die as fast as possible. You can wing everything else if need be, but he is simply too big of a threat to be ignored. Once he's out of play, everything else will become much easier. So, that's how the Vanguard boss fight works. I hope that I've been able to help those of you who find this fight difficult, and I also hope that some of you might have found a new appreciation for this fight as well. Now, I made this video because I love this fight for a lot of reasons. The attacks, the counterplay, the revenge mechanic, it's all great. But to be honest, the main reason I made this video is because this fight is just really cool.
Cast and cry, raise the million pylons high. All our kin were bound to fly for that far shore forlorn. Onward high, who but we may tame the sky.